Alright, hey everybody, my name's Jack, and I've decided that I'm going to start a little podcast to just sort of discuss the weird goings on of my week, as I seem to run into a lot of weird situations as my weeks go on. And I'm thinking that if I talk about it, a bunch of people on the internet, such as yourself, are going to find it to be really funny in a really strange sort of way. If this works, great. If not, I'm sure there's a bunch of other podcasts out there that really didn't work out. I'm not too upset about it. But anyway, recently I go to a school that they had a thing this week called Sin Awareness Day. And I have never seen a more great and terrible event happen since I started at this college. I'm a senior. So in my 4 years here, this takes the cake is like the weirdest, funniest shit I've ever seen. So my day starts, it was a Tuesday, it starts around 8 a.m. Go to my law class, I'm sitting there taking notes, being a good little boy. And then that wraps up at around 9:15. And I walk out and there's this van pulling up. And I'm like, okay, that's not that out of the ordinary, but and then I see who gets out of it, and it's just this man, followed by 4 other men, carrying a crucifix and a lawn chair for the 5 of them. And I just knew that from there, this was gonna get weird. So I book it. I get out of there. I don't want any trouble, and I know this is nothing but trouble. And I go to the library, and I find a chair, and I just watch this happen. And this thing unfolded in a way that I never would have predicted. And in a way that I don't think will ever be replicated. It was just strangeness unbound. It was so amazingly weird. So these guys finished setting up around 9:45. And as soon as they get their soapbox out, this dude in a red sweatshirt just walks up onto it, looks around at no one that's gathered around him, and just says, "Gay people don't exist, and racism is God's will." And I swear to God himself that this man had a crowd around 9:50. It was the fastest gathering of people with just a common aim. Make this dude regret ever coming here. Which I think really that's exactly what this whole group wanted. I think they just wanted a bunch of people to just get upset so they could have some attention for whatever reason. I'm sure they have their own reasons. But if that's what they wanted, they got it. Because this turned into like a 3-hour ordeal that just, it defined my day. It was such a disrupting presence, but it was so funny to watch because all of the people that gathered around decided, hey, you can say all the dumb shit you want because we can't stop you, but we're just going to get real weird with how we try to protest this. To start, there's the initial crowd, and then we start seeing our first signs. And the first sign, I'm like, oh wow, maybe this guy's gonna have like a little something to really argue with this. And it just says the Atlanta Falcons blew a 21-3 lead against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And I was like, oh shit, buddy, here we go. This is just gonna be a bunch of memes at old people that don't understand them. And it's just going to turn into one giant inside joke. And I was so ready. I sat back and I watched it all happen. Next guy came out with a sign that just said, "Peas stored in the balls." And he just held that, like that was his hill to die on, was just this old, long dead meme of just peas stored in the balls. And around this time, it's around 10 o'clock, 10:30. And this professor walks out and he stands next to me. And it's this old man. He's teaching for a while. He has tenure. He's just going about it. He's like, oh, wow, this is happening again. I'm like, again? What the fuck? Again? He's like, oh, yeah, this happens once a year. So I'm like, all right, that's fine. And he's just standing there next to me. And he's like hunched over, bad back, bad knees, almost like almost hunched over himself, leaning onto the railing. And he just points at a sign that I haven't seen yet. And he just says, what does that one say? And I've never had a more awkward experience of just reading a sign and realizing I'm going to have to say this to a professor out loud. And The sign just read, "P is stored in the shaft." Sort of to, like, I guess, protest the other sign of protest of P is stored in the balls. Like, the two people holding them up got in a fight about it, like a little spat. Just like, oh, well, you think this, I think this, and they're all protesting gay people based on their existence. But we're going to fight about these signs. And I watched him, like, I wouldn't use the word disappointment, but if I had to, he was disappointed. He thought it was going to be this nice, like, rallying cry of just, like, something really, really good. And then it was just peas stored in the shaft and peas stored in the balls. And he was just disappointed. There's no other word to use. And then after a bit, he wanders away. And it sort of slows down a bit. Like, it's 10:45 now, almost 11 o'clock. All the kids that were gathered around are going to class because that's what they came out for anyway. And I start to really, really look around at the people that I'll say the opposing side because it opposes my views to just set up with a cross and try to harass kids on their views of the world. And it was so dysfunctional. There was one man in a camo jacket, and he had a sign, but it was taped to him so that he wouldn't drop it, so that he would have to just hold up this sign that just was like, "Are you going to heaven?" And I don't know, dude, that's not for me to decide. That's not for you to decide either. There was another man, older man. They were all older men. I'm not going to specify that. They were all, like, past 60. I feel like you have to be past 60 to really rally for this specific cause, because you never see anybody younger than that really going out. Like, you might have your own personal private views, but you never see anybody under that age protesting it. It's always older people, which is fine. I have nothing against the elderly, but this guy was just, he looked like someone's grandpa had gotten lost and just wandered into this hate ring and just kind of was like, didn't know what to do with himself. He was just hands in his hoodie pockets, hood up, looking around, just standing there, shifting from one side to the other, and he looked like a lost thing. He looked like a man out of time. And then he ran into the library, which I thought that was going to be the end of him. But then he also came up next to me and just started to take pictures through the glass that I was looking through of just the crowd that was gathering. And I put it together like, oh, you are with this group. You're just like its social media guy. Like, these are going on your Instagram or whatever. They don't have an Instagram. They probably have a really old HTML4 site floating around on the internet somewhere. But that's what they bring him along for. He's the picture guy. The guy that was holding the crucifix from earlier, like, stopped to take a phone call in the middle of it, which there's no way that was with everything going on, there's no way that was a constructive phone call. There's just, you couldn't have heard the other person. It was too loud. And he just takes a phone call like nobody's business. And he almost drops the cross that he's holding. And I feel like that would have gotten him, I feel like he would have gotten kicked out if it did fall into, I'm going to call it the crowd. It was more like a mob. If it fell into the mob and they got a hold of it, I think he gets uninvited. I think he's out of the club at that point. And oh my God, this is hour one. All of this has happened in the first hour of this. It was an event of this event. And then they just kind of start wandering away. Like, I'm going to call them the old men. Half the old men just start, like, meandering about the lawn. But they never left the 100-foot range. They just kept moseying out. And then didgeridoo guy comes in. If old dudes holding a crucifix on a soapbox telling 20-year-olds that they had to be ready to die and go to hell were the evil empire from Star Wars, the original trilogy, didgeridoo guy was Luke fucking Skywalker. He arrived on scene and he just demanded you pay attention to what he was doing. They rolled him out on an office chair that I think they stole. I think they stole it from one of the university buildings. They roll him out in it fast. Like, this is like 4 or 5 dudes running out with a kid in an office chair playing a didgeridoo. And they push him into the crowd and they spin him. And he just goes sailing into this crowd of people, spinning, playing a didgeridoo, which, if you haven't heard a didgeridoo, it is one of the wildest instruments, I think anywhere. I think the Australian, like, it's sort of like a vuvuzela, but it's not. It's got like a wah wah sort of sound. It's wild. It's disruptive. And it worked because he got in the middle of that crowd and he stopped himself and then just started spinning. And he gets there and he just gets up and starts like really going in on the didgeridoo. Like, he is playing it. He is putting his heart and soul into the music he's playing. And all the old dudes are like, they're on stairs and one of them's on the soapbox. It was like somebody dropped a dime. It just got silent except for the didgeridoo. And he just spun around and ran around, jumped around. He hit the floor, and he was immediately the alpha of the whole situation. He just took the spotlight. I've never seen anything like it. He was in that friggin' anime sweatshirt, long hair, really elaborately carved didgeridoo. And he just took it. It was his. That was no longer their protest, and it became didgeridoo guy's like concert. And the police had to go out, get him out of the circle because there was going to be violence. He was going to start a fight just by playing the didgeridoo. It was wild. So this is, with the arrival of Didgeridoo Guy, we've hit chapter 2, or rather hour 2. And hour 2 is the more eventful of the 3 hours, because you have Didgeridoo Guy, but then we have what I called the war for the stool, where everyone around, all the students decided, hey, the only reason anybody's listening to them and the whole like source of their power is that stool they're standing on. Let's try to get it. And so every few minutes, they just made a pass for the stool. Like, they just kept trying to get at it. And it was like a death spiral. It was a bunch of people circling, and then one would reach out for the stool, and they had no hope of getting the stool. Someone's standing on it. You can't just take it. And after a while, they realized that, and they're like, all right, we're not getting the stool. We need round 2. We need another battle plan. And they come back out with one of those step stools you get at the library on the wheels. And they get a couple of them, and they all just stand on them with their like peas stored in the balls signs. And they made like a star around it. And this made the people on the soapbox extremely upset. Up until Didgeridoo Guy, they'd been standing up there. Everyone was yelling at them, shouting, get the hell off our campus. We don't want you here, blah, blah, blah. All of that valid protest. And then when they got the stools out, I think it was like watching a 5-year-old that you just said can't have a cookie have a tantrum. Because they were really, really upset that they weren't the spotlight anymore. It wasn't on them. It now had to be on the 5 people above them in stool power ranking. They all lined up, which if you ever see old people line up, that is like the old man power stance. You can't defeat them if they stand up. And they stand in a line. Even the guy in the lawn chair from earlier, he brought his lawn chair, he set it up, and he hung out for the whole thing. It was almost like he was the designated driver of it all. And he couldn't participate in all the fun because he had to be responsible. Even he got up and he wandered over, and they all got in a line, and they just started like shouting, gesticulating at people and just being like, get off your stools, ah! And it was like a 20-minute war for these stools that there was no reason the stools really couldn't be there other than that it was kind of a safety thing. But they were just so passionate about being the tallest people in the room, or in the quad, let's say. that once these stools rolled out, all bets were off. It was war. There was nothing anyone could predict. It was just happening. And while it happened, we have the arrival of the last player, who I called Milkman, who just came out with a gallon of milk. I don't know where on campus he got a gallon of milk, but he had one. And he just stood in the middle of it all, just holding a gallon of milk. And at first I thought, okay, Milkman's lost. This can't be what he wanted out of his Tuesday afternoon. It's noon on a Tuesday. What are you doing, Milkman? What's your deal? But then he just stood in the middle of the war for the stool, and he was just there, holding a gallon of milk. And it's the things that's like the smallest thing that you notice, but it was so out of place. He had a script that was telling him, all right, go to store, get milk, return home. And someone stopped the return home part of the script, and he just had to stand there and wait for instruction. Come to find out, Milkman he's a player in all of this. And after the whole war for the stool ends, which ended with the police coming in, taking all the stools and being like, yeah, these all can roll around. This isn't that safe. Which the police, they wanted to say hey, yeah, what you're doing is cool, even though it's breaking the law. But these guys do have a permit to be here, and it's 1 day a year, so we can't really do anything. And they had to take the stools. And then Milkman came. He came back. I had lost him initially. I did not know where Milkman went. But he comes back with his gallon of milk, and he just sets it at the foot. He sets it at the foot of the soapbox, the initial soapbox, the soapbox of hate, and then just walks away like he's some sort this was his big moment. His shining moment was to just deposit the milk at the foot of the soapbox. And then the whole crowd just starts chanting, "He needs some milk," which, yeah, old memes are all we have to fight this. I feel like it could have been so much more, but it was the weirdest out of context part of the whole event was weird, but this was the most out of place weird, where you just don't know why any of it happened, but it was hilarious, and I laughed about it with these people standing next to me, which I'd been reporting it on Snapchat to my friends, hey, we're live out here. I called it Old Dude Burning Man, and I'd just been reporting it on my Snapchat, and I'm getting a bunch of chats going. Everyone's like, whoa, dude, it's getting wild. I took the "Are you ready for hell?" crucifix and just made it say, "Are you ready, kids? Aye, aye, Captain." But that was the high point of my week. And I feel like that's going to be enough for this podcast for now. We've reached about the 30-minute mark. So if you guys like this sort of thing, I'd appreciate it if you could share it around on your Facebook, Twitter, and what have you. You don't have to. I might set up a Patreon. I don't know. Depends on if this takes off, really. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll probably see you next week.